Hi guys. So I'm here to talk a little bit about what it's like to volunteer for political candidates. Really, the most important thing you can do for any candidate that the union supports is to get registered to vote and to vote. Voting's so easy nowadays, especially with polls opening up early. You can mail in votes, or obviously you can vote on election day. But when it comes to volunteering for candidates, really there's two types of campaign phases. There's what's called the persuasion phase. That's when we're trying to get out to reach voters, to make sure they understand the candidates, and we're trying to persuade them to vote for the candidates. As volunteers, typically the best way to do this is through canvassing or through phone banking. Canvassing obviously is walking around a neighborhood, knocking on doors, talking to people, where phone banking is making phone calls. But basically you're doing the same thing. You're reaching out to registered voters. In the case of canvassing, you get a list of addresses with the maps of all the registered voters. It has some additional information on there, like whether they're a strong Democrat, a strong Republican, they lean Democrat, they lean Republican, or they're not decided, or an independent voter. There's also some kind of likelihood to vote criteria on there. Sometimes that's a score of 0 to 100, or more often it's rating of where they voted in the last municipal elections the last 3 times, if they voted in the last primary elections the last 3 times, or the last 3 general elections, how many times they voted in those types of elections. So when you go out to canvass, you're given a list of generally between 40 and 50 addresses. You're expected to hit about 20 to 25 an hour. So a typical shift is about 2 hours. The contact rate is generally about 20%. So you would expect over a 2-hour shift that you probably talk to about 10 or 15 people. A phone bank is a similar shift, except the contact rate is much lower. It's generally about 5%. So over a 2-hour shift, you're calling more people, but with a lower contact rate, you're still contacting about 10 or so people over a 2-hour shift. You're given a script to read. So this weekend I was out canvassing for Ann Gillespie, and my script went something like this. Hello, my name is Chad. I'm a local firefighter here walking today in support of Ann Gillespie, a Democrat running for Illinois Senate. Have you heard of Ann before? We support Ann because she supports public safety and she supports working families. Her agenda is that she wants to clean up Springfield. She wants to bring back compromise so we can actually get something done in Springfield. She's interested in working families. She's interested in women's rights. And she also supports some common sense gun control. She's not looking to take away anybody's guns, but she wants to make sure of things like people have FOID cards when they're buying and selling guns. People generally don't have questions, but if they do, you can maybe answer the questions or refer them to a website. But you end off the conversation asking if the person thinks they could support your candidate in the November elections, and if they say yes, you ask if they would like a yard sign. As you're talking to people, the campaign is looking for some feedback on where they stand. So you'll be asked to give a rating for somebody. If they seem very supportive, if they commit to voting, they'd be 1 as an example. If they say, no, there's no way I'm voting for that candidate, I'm actually voting for their opponent, then they would be a 5. Or somewhere in between. If they're undecided, they would be a 3, as an example. At the end of the conversation, you lead them with a card that has all the information, and you take back their scores to the campaign office. So an important thing to remember while you're doing this is you can't wear any fire department related uniform items, or even anything with a logo on it. You are allowed to wear union apparel, so you can wear a local polo shirt. You can't talk about your fire department work. You can say that you're a firefighter, but when we were out this weekend, one of the questions that came up is, oh, what station are you at? In situations like that, you have to say, well, we can't talk about that while we're doing political work, but we are local firefighters. And usually when you're sent out in groups of 2. So there's a couple ways to do that. You can go door to door together. One person does the talking while the other person kind of organizes everything, making sure you get to the right addresses, copying down those scores, things like that. Or in cases where you're not doing so much talking, or maybe you've got some more experienced canvassers, you can take an odd side of the street and an even side of the street and work your way down the street together. So that's kind of phone banking and canvassing. As we move closer to election day, we get into what's called the get out the vote style of our phase of campaigning. And that's where we're trying to get the people that we know are going to vote for our candidates actually out to the polls. Make sure they understand where their polling place is, make sure they understand where it is, how it's open. Many campaigns will offer rides to polls if people need that. So our role as volunteers is generally what's called a lit drop, where we're still going door to door, but we're not talking to anybody. We're just leaving cards that have polling places and our candidates' information on there. Another big thing is yard signs. As we get people who want yard signs, there's going to be shifts coming up where we can place yard signs. We get a list of addresses and a stack of signs. We just go door to door and place them in people's yards. So really easy, no contact with the voters, but an easy way to do things. Then finally on election day, there's plenty of opportunities, whether it's poll watching, whether it's just putting out signs or taking down signs at the end of the election. There's a lot of different opportunities for volunteers on those days. So again, guys, the most important thing is to register and to go out and vote on election day or before during early voting. But take a look at the endorsed candidates from the AFFI. We'll make sure we get that out to you guys. And if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me or any of the executive board. Thanks a lot, guys.